So, and there you go. There it is.
All right. Hang on, I have to click my thing here. Okay. All right, well, welcome all. I am going to call this meeting to order. This is the Friday, May 5th meeting of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And we are going to start with introduction. So I am going to go through the members. If you are a voting member, please introduce yourself when I name your jurisdiction. And then I will hand off to Katrina. Is Katrina doing staff introductions, Mark? And Katrina will do staff introductions for us. So welcome, everybody. We'll start with City of Olympia.
Whew, okay, I might have Lori give you a call. Okay, you bet.
Clark Gilman, Vice Chair from the pretty good city of Olympia, aspiring to Tenino greatness.
Thank you.
And how about City of Lacey?
Robin Vasquez, City of Lacey.
Great. Hi, Robin. City of Tumwater.
Eileen is on vacation, so she may not be here today.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie.
But I can do double duty.
Okay. How about Thurston County? I saw Commissioner.
Gary Edwards. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner. How about City of Rainier?
Dennis McVeigh, happy Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. Nice to see you. And City Tenino.
Not to be overly corrective, but it's the great city of Tenino, and I'm John O'Callaghan representing the great city of Tenino.
I am happy to offer you that opportunity at every meeting to show your Tenino pride, John. The City of Yelm. Do we see Joe? No. Okay, we'll come back. How about Bucota? And Confederated Tribes of Chehalis Reservation. How about Nisqually Indian Tribe? How about North Thurston Public Schools? I saw
Graham Sackerson.
Hi, Graham.
Hi.
And Tumwater School District.
Al Murray, Director of Facilities.
Hi, Mel.
Hello.
And I am Hillary Seidel. I'm here representing the Olympia School District Board of Directors. How about Intercity Transit?
Debbie Sullivan, Intercity Transit.
Hi, Debbie. Lot Clean Water Alliance.
Carolyn Cox here.
Hi, Carolyn. And Port of Olympia. I think I saw Amy.
Good morning, Amy Harding.
There you are. Hi, Amy. How about PUD of Thurston County?
Chris Stearns, Thurston PUD District 3, and I'm just the alternate, so Russ will be replacing me this summer when he gets around to coming to a meeting.
All right, sounds good. How about Thurston Conservation District? And Lacey Fire District?
Hi, Liberty Hetzler, Lacey Fire District 3.
Hi, Liberty. Puget Sound Regional Council is never here. Evergreen State College.
Scott Morgan, Evergreen State College.
Hi, Scott. Thurston EDC. Okay.
Michael let us know he wouldn't be here today.
Oh, he did. Okay, thank
Yes.
you, Mark. How about Timberland Regional Library?
Good morning, Cheryl Haywood, Timberland Regional Library with a really bad cold.
Oh, thank you for being here, Cheryl. Okay, I think I saw David Ayel pop in from Nisqually Indian Tribe. Did I see?
Yes, I'm also represent the Conservation District.
Oh, you are? Okay. Thank you. And do we have anyone joining us from Yelm, Bucota, or Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis or Tumwater? Anybody pop in? No? Okay. Well, welcome all. We have a nice assembly of our members today. We're going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move. Graham.
Graham moves and John O'Callaghan seconds. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Or
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the agenda is approved. That brings us to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion?
We're politicians. We can have discussions on lots of stuff.
Well, is there any discussion about this consent calendar? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Great, the consent calendar is approved, and I did what I promised I wouldn't do, so we're gonna go back to Katrina for staff introductions, but I really did that on purpose just to make sure everybody could get into the meeting, Katrina. So Katrina, could you please do staff introductions?
Absolutely. Good morning, Katrina Van Every with TRPC. In addition to myself, we have Mark Daly, Dorinda Merrill, Berlina Lucas, Dave Reed, Crosby Carter, and Karen Parkhurst from Intercity Transit. We have Emily Bergkamp and Jonathan Yee. From Thurston County, we have Matt Unzelman. From the city of Lacey, we have Martin Hoppy, and I believe that's everyone, but if I missed anyone, please speak up.
Well, one thing that I'll mention, Chair and council members, is we do have Kimber Starr joining us this morning, who is newly assigned staff from Congresswoman Strickland's office. And so we're having a chance to get her up to speed on some of what we've got going on. So thank you so much for joining us, Kimber. Appreciate it.
Welcome, Kimber.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And thank you for your gracious introduction, Katrina. This is just the dance we do every other meeting. I skip over one part of that agenda item. So my apologies to staff for that. That brings us to the public comment. And I believe we have one community member who is registered for public comment. Ursula Euler is joining us. And Ursula, when you are ready, you may begin your public comment.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm a Thurston County resident, just for the record. I talk to you quite frequently, especially lately because of aviation expansion activity in the South Puget Sound, and that is ongoing. Today, I want to comment on your minutes because I saw the minutes on last time's agenda number 5 mention that I've given public comment, but the detail is very scant. And I would like to request that perhaps it be amended and expanded to say something to the effect that I have requested to include to potentially hold a conversation, because we've never really, as a South Puget Sound region, we've never had a conversation about aviation with citizens. And I have asked for that last time, and that wasn't really documented in the minutes. And I would also be interested in what your sentiment on that is, to maybe hear a response. So I've actually written a modified version. I also asked if that conversation can't happen, if you're not comfortable with having a conversation with citizens, if perhaps at least the TRPC or one of your member organizations could make a facility available for a responsible citizen group to come together. At this point, the conversation is probably what have we learned and where do we go from here? But there are important information pieces that are scientific, technology related, that really are useful and very necessary for any community that could potentially be looked at for another mega airport, that any community needs to know very broadly. These informations are not distributed by the public press, not distributed and not talked about by elected officials, not even the governor or our legislators. Unfortunately, they are all listening to commerce and hype and not really scientific information. So if that could be expanded in this case, I would really appreciate that. And that's my public comment today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. We appreciate your public comment and your participation in the process. That brings us to our other business, and I have something to read here for agenda item number 6. So, as stated on the agenda item number 6 is an executive session. The purpose of this executive session is to discuss a personnel item, Executive Director's 6-year evaluation. No decisions will be made in executive session. It will only serve as an opportunity for council members to have discussion and ask questions. The council will reconvene at approximately 9 a.m. to continue with the published agenda. The council will now adjourn to executive session. Audience participants will be placed in a virtual waiting room.
Do we know when we're likely to return? Oh,
9 a.m.
thank you.
Hi, Hillary.
Hi.
Did you need more time?
No, everybody should be coming back.
Okay, let me just close the room then.
Reluctant to push the leave meeting button.
Don't leave the meeting, just leave the breakout room. I've made that mistake before myself. Okay. Well, welcome. I think everybody's back. I will now reconvene the May 5th meeting of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. The time is 9:01. Took us an extra minute to get everybody back in. We will now move to agenda item number 7. I would entertain a motion to approve the evaluation subcommittee recommendation for Executive Director Daley's evaluation and approve a one-time merit pay bonus of 3.5% of the executive director's base salary.
So
Second.
moved.
Wait, John O'Callahan moved, and who seconded?
Robin.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, John.
You're
It's
welcome.
been moved. The motion has been moved and seconded. Berlina, do I need to reread the motion or can we move to vote now?
You can move to vote now.
Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the evaluation subcommittee recommendation for Executive Director Daley's evaluation and approve a one-time merit pay bonus of 3.5% of the Executive Director's base salary, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The motion is adopted, and with our gratitude, Mark, we celebrate your past year and we look forward to the next year of partnership and learning and service for all of our wonderfully diverse members of our Thurston County community. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, council. I love this job. I love working with our staff and working with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. All right. That brings us to agenda item number 8, which is the state fiscal year 2024 indirect cost proposal. And this is a presentation, a short presentation from Mark with a few minutes for discussion. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
All right, good thing we did the evaluation now because we are going into the wild and woolly world of indirect cost proposals. Normally we do this as a consent calendar item, but we haven't talked about it in an open meeting in a while. And so I wanted a chance to go through this with council to make sure people understood what our indirect rate is, what it's for, and why does it fluctuate. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of more background than we usually do on the indirect rate. And I've only got one slide for this, but I am going to show it because I do think it helps to explain what we're talking about when we're talking about the indirect rate. So, let me maximize that. There we go. Is everyone seeing that okay? Once it there it goes, once it reformats itself. So what our indirect rate is, and this is the only slide I have, is we take all of our expenditures for the year and we look at what kinds of things are we spending our money on that are directly related to projects or directly related to specific accounts, and what kinds of things are those indirect costs. And so the indirect costs are things like our building rent, renting copiers, our IT infrastructure, a portion of my time and our admin support time. And so these are all costs that we have that aren't attributable to any given project. They serve the whole breadth of our organization. And so the way the federal government handles that and the state government is by allowing entities to have an indirect rate where you take all those indirect costs, and I'm looking at this. Well, I don't know why my cursor isn't following me. There it goes. Oops. Like I said, good thing we already did the eval. So we take all of those indirect costs, and what we do is we look back at the previous year. So these are all based on actuals. And so in 2022, for IT and for our information technology, for my time, for all those kinds of indirect costs, we were just over $1 million. All the things that we were able to directly bill to projects, we were just over 2 million. And that is the main part of this equation, because basically all we do here is say how much of our direct billings, what percent do we need to add on to those direct billings to account for all of our indirect costs, or rent, our IT and everything. And so based on 2022, that indirect rate is 54.6%. That is a bit, and we do this every year. And that was higher than last year's, which was 49 point something. And the main reason for that is when costs have gone up. And so when you look at our costs from 2021 to 2022, especially like our service costs around IT and some other services, our payroll with the county increased by about 10,000. And so there were it's really about a lot of little things that are associated with inflation over the past year that have raised those indirect costs. All that being said, I think this somewhere in the kind of 52 to 55% is realistic for who we are, what we are, and what our indirect costs are. And so I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at now and where we're going to be. But I did want to note it so that council members could have a chance to consider, ask any questions, because again, it is a little higher than it was last year. And I just wanted to make sure people had a chance to talk about that if there were any questions. And so I'm going to stop sharing now. And I see that, Robin, you have a question.
Yeah, I think of these as central service costs, because I'm in the
That's right.
central service business also. But the nuance of being able to bill like staff hours, like wages and benefits to certain projects is good to know, because that's a little different than how we roll. Can you talk again about the excluded costs? Like, how do we identify the things that are excluded? Is it one-time things that only happen once, like purchases of equipment that's not going to keep rolling around, or is it something else?
No, for us, those excluded costs are primarily monies that we get that we pass through to other entities. And so we don't directly, we don't do any work with those funds. Therefore, we do not include those in indirect and don't charge those indirect. And so that fluctuates year to year, but those are, for the most part, those are passed through costs for us.
Can you give an example of this past year, what that 54,000, where that went?
I'm trying to think of what the pass-throughs we had in 2022 were. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I can get you that information. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm just
Councilmember,
curious. That's okay.
For us, it's usually transportation funds that come through us, and we just have them go out the door, but I can check on that and get you the specifics. Okay. No, nothing earth shattering here. Just wanted to make sure everyone knew that this is how we do it. We then submit this, our indirect cost rate, to Washington State Department of Transportation. And we use this then on all of our direct billings, and it helps us recoup those indirect costs that we can't bill directly to any one account. Councilmember Gilman.
Thanks, Mark. One of the questions that comes to mind for me is about whether this includes the contracted services that we do for our member organizations, and whether there's a difference in the indirect cost of sort of grant funded, board approved stuff versus contracted work for our governments.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do charge this same rate to all of our billings, including our contracted services, because again, when you think of, I like the way Robin put it, when you think of this as kind of our central service costs, those apply to everything that we do, right? We need that infrastructure to do everything we do. That said, there are, as you brought up, grants. There are some grant funds and some funds that we get through the state where they have a cap on the indirect rate, which it can make things challenging. So to provide a concrete example, we host the salmon recovery lead entity for the Deschutes watershed. We talked about that at the last meeting. And the Recreation and Conservation Office, the state Recreation and Conservation Office that provides us with those funds, they have a cap on indirect of 25%. And so there are some of our agreements where we do have a cap, which is unfortunate because that somewhat puts the load on other accounts to make up that difference. And so that is something we do a little bit reluctantly. There aren't many deviations from our indirect rate. The primary one that we have in place right now is associated with the salmon recovery lead entity funds. Okay.
That was going to be my question too, Mark, is like how many of the interactions we have those caps? I mean, working in state government as I do, there's always like certain places that we know we can't charge a certain indirect rate.
Yeah, for the most part of the lead entities, all we have, the State Department of Transportation does a very good job of understanding that you've got to pay for your central services. Therefore, and that's the majority of the kind of contracts that we enter into for funds, and that is why we prepare this indirect rate. They allow us to prepare it. They allow us to charge it. I mean, it's all based on actuals. So this is just what it costs for us to do business, and how do we recoup those costs?
Great. Well, thank you very much for bringing this to us. And it is good to pull things off the consent calendar for the benefit of those of us who haven't had that conversation before, and also just for the benefit of the members of the public that we represent, to have some access to that decision-making process. So thank you for taking the time to prepare for us, Mark.
Absolutely.
That brings us to our agenda item number 9, which is also Mark sharing with us a new position classification. And do we need to take action on the indirect rates?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Or wait, yes, we do. Yes, we do need to take action. I'm so sorry. We do.
Okay, so if so, I would entertain a motion to approve the indirect rates as presented by the executive director. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the indirect rate as presented by the director.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded by Robin and Clark. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the indirect rates as presented, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand, or both.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great, they are approved. That brings us to agenda item number 9, which is a new position classification. This is also being presented by Mark. We have a short presentation and time for discussion, and we are taking action today on this agenda item as well. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So this is something that we first talked about a little over a year ago, back in March of 2022. So this is related to the transition of 2 of our key managers, former Deputy Director Vina Tabbitt, that left us in September of 2022, And then we have the upcoming retirement of our planning and policy director, Karen Parkhurst. And so two very senior people who'd been with us for a long time and have tons of experience. And so we were really deliberate in succession planning for those two positions. And so a year ago, I presented to council kind of the full succession plan. And now we're about to implement the last part of that. And that is what this new position is about. And so I am going to share my screen for a second and remind folks, and especially those that weren't here at the time, what we looked like before and then what we will look like afterwards. So this is where we were in 2022 before either Vina Tabet or Karen left the organization, where we had the executive director, the deputy director, Vina, and the planning and policy director, Karen Parkhurst. And this purple, light purple, is together with me. That was our management team. And that worked well because of all the experience that Vina and Karen have and the long standing they have with the organization. That worked well. However, as we're looking at a new future with some different people in places, one of the things that we wanted to do was kind of broaden this management team to some extent. Having all the information flowing through three people worked, but wasn't ideal in terms of really making sure that everyone within the organization knows what's going on, has an opportunity to provide meaningful input, and that we're just doing the best we can to utilize all of our resources. And so we took this as an opportunity to kind of flatten the organization a little bit and broaden that management structure so that we had some better representation across our organization, which is going to be more important as we no longer had these two very senior people. And so again, this is what we looked like in 2022. And this is what we look like now in 2023, where we're about to do, and that's what you'll be taking action on today, is establishing this planning manager classification. So just as a reminder, when Vina left, we created the finance and HR manager. Council took action to create that position, which was filled by Tyson Justice on May 1st of last year. We also, for Vina, had a responsibility over a lot of our transportation work. And one of the things that we heard from staff and partners, honestly, was that we really needed a transportation lead. We've got tons of requirements, tons of work that we have to do on a regular basis around transportation, and having a single point person for that it was what we wanted to do. And I'll tell you, we've been doing it since August of 2022, and it is working very well. It has helped us, in my estimation, a great deal in terms of making sure we're really staying on top of everything that we need to do. Katrina Van Every's doing a great job on that. And then we also used Katrina Van Every was a senior planner before this. And so we started recruiting to backfill her planner position in 2022. And that's when we were fortunate enough to get Crosby Carter, who joined us in January of 2023. And she is doing excellent work already, which you'll be hearing more about over the next year. And then also Berlina Lucas became the executive assistant. We gave her some more responsibilities over finance, because when Vina left, we wanted to make sure that we had the checks and balances in place that we needed to make sure that we are doing our finances exactly as we need to be, and that we've got appropriate oversight, and including, multiple sets of eyes looking at numbers before they get finalized. And as council hopefully remembers, we've got a number of years now in a row of clean audits, and that is something that is incredibly important to me, because it's incredibly important to our work and our ability to continue to do that work and the credibility of our organization. And so that was an important part of this transition, is to make sure that we kept those institutional controls over how we're doing our finances, and that's working well as well. And so those pieces are in place. We've also broadened the management team to include our IT manager that has already been on staff for a long time, Dave Reed, include our GIS and modeling manager that was already in this position but reported to Vina, and now that position is part of the management team. Finance and HR is part. We also made the executive assistant as part of the management team, so that we are considering our administrative services at the same time we're talking about all of our programmatic work. And I think that too has been helpful. And then the new transportation manager position. So we've just broadened who all is in our management circle, which is helping to make sure that we've got broad input and distribution into our decision making, and that we've got a better flow of information to the rest of our organization, because that was one of the things that I had been hearing from staff, is we needed to improve some of our internal communications in terms of what comes out of management team discussions. So that's why we broadened that. This is this new planning manager position. All these manager positions are at a slightly lower level than when Vina and Karen had them. They were director level positions, which are a couple of steps higher. These manager positions are just a little bit lower than where Vina and Karen did, which is part of what helped us be able to kind of finance a little bit of a broader management team structure. And so this planning manager position that we're asking to have council action today is really focused on this planning team. We've got about 10 planners that report to this planning manager, which is a decent sum considering the breadth of what we do. There's a lot of different work going on at any one time, and we really wanted someone that could focus in on helping the planners scope that work, budget that work, implement it, and keep us moving along, keep the work going on the schedule and under the budgets and under the scope that we had planned on. And so this manager will be a little more emphasis on helping to manage the work of the planning team, helping to mentor the staff of the planning team, and will have much less programmatic work that they are responsible for than what Karen has had. Karen, because of all of her years of experience and all the things that she knows, she had all the planners reporting to her, and quite a bit of programmatic work. And oftentimes it was too much under one person. And so not going to have that same programmatic work responsibility, really going to focus on managing the work and the planning team. And so that is what you've got before you is, and just to remind you, why is this coming to council? In our bylaws, it states that things like creating new position classes need to go to council. And so that is what we're doing. And the position description is in your packet. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Do you want to should we keep sharing the screen for questions or not?
I'll go back to it if we need to,
Okay.
but I love to be able to see people if
Okay,
I can.
let's,
Okay.
we'll go to Chris first and then Robin, and I'll run the queue. So Chris, go ahead.
Great.
Actually, it was Robin was before me.
I know, but Robin already asked a question this meeting. so
Oh,
now
okay.
you go
Well,
first.
very simple question. Karen Parkhurst's responsibilities was with the legislature and government relations with the state. Who's handling that task now that she is passing the torch?
Yeah. Veronica Jarvis and I will be handling that in the future. So for those that have been involved, we've been between Karen and I have a lot of experience with the legislature as well, and we've kind of been splitting that duty since I've been here. I've primarily been working with the Thurston Shared Legislative Partnership, and Karen has primarily been handling our TRPC meetings with legislators. We're going to, and folks that don't know Veronica Jarvis, she came to us from the Office of Financial Management. She has tons of experience with the legislature. And so I think we are in really good shape to keep that work going as it has been.
As I remember, that's the agency that deals with all the fiscal nuts for the legislature.
Yes, but and more. I mean, they're an extension of the policy arm of the governor's office, and so yes, they are in charge of the finance side. But as folks that can tell us that worked with OFM and for OFM, that is an incredibly important piece of the governor's policy and finance dealings. So really good experience for a person to have. You get a breadth of topics and just how our state works. People at OFM know it well.
Yeah.
As Robin, you can attest to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have some knowledge here. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with Veronica when I was still at OFM on statewide telework policy, which is relevant to this group. But I had two quick questions, maybe quick, maybe one's an observation. Mark, this org chart results in you supervising a substantially larger number of people. How's that going?
I'll be honest, that is part of the challenge, and also purposeful in that to maintain continuity. I have had the privilege of being able to lean on Vina and Karen for my first 5 years of this work, because they are two big reasons why we are doing as well as we are. And therefore, when those two people aren't there anymore, yes, it's more work for me, but to maintain that continuity, to make sure that we're continuing to do what we need to do, and that we're catching the things that Vina and Karen have been helping us with for years. I felt it really important to be hands-on and direct. So yes, it's a fair amount, as many of you know, if not all of you, managing people takes time, and so it does take some time. But I do think it's the right call.
And I think my other question or observation is just, I'm in favor generally of flattening organizations, and that appears to be what's happening here, is that you're broadening out the decision maker pool of leaders.
That's right.
It seems as though the main change to the position is to remove the programmatic functions so that this person can focus more on supporting their staff.
That's right.
And I think a lot of organizations overlook that. That's part of the thrust of my previous question. Is it is time and effort and energy to be a manager, and sometimes we overlook that requires bandwidth for a person, and we assign them program tasks and projects, and then we just assume they get their supervision done on the side. So I'm glad to see that this position is shifting so that the planning team has more support.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that is exactly what is behind this change.
Thanks, Robin. Good questions and observations all. Are there any additional questions for Mark? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the new position classification of planning manager.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Graham. Graham.
moved by Dennis and seconded by Graham. Is there any further discussion of the new position, the new planning manager position? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the proposal for the new planning manager position, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? And any abstentions? Great. Go forth. Oh, wait.
Just one quick thing I forgot to mention
Yes,
is
go ahead.
this is going to hit the streets on May 9th. So thank you all.
Great. Go forth and hire a planning manager, Mark. We're
Will do.
excited.
Will do. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to, it brings us to our break. So we have scheduled a 5-minute break and we are running almost exactly on time. So great job, everyone. We're going to take a 5-minute break and we will return at 9:36. So please exercise some positive self-care, do some stretching, get a cup of coffee, whatever you need. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay. Are we ready to come back? I think we have Katrina for this next item. Right. So, hi Katrina, this is the state fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. And we are seeing this for first reading, correct?
Correct. So this is just a review, an opportunity to ask questions. No decision needs to be made today. That will go for your next meeting.
Okay, so Katrina's going to give us our presentation and then we're going to hold questions to the end and I will keep an eye on the queue. So you can raise your hand throughout the presentation if you're like, oh, I have a question and you want to get in the queue, that's fine, but we'll hold questions till the end. Go ahead and take it away, Katrina.
Thank you. So I am here to talk to you about the Unified Planning Work Program for our state fiscal year 2024. That begins July 1 and goes to June 30th of next year. So that's the time period that this program or this document covers. So what exactly is the UPWP or the Unified Planning Work Program? It describes how we as an agency conduct our regional transportation work. There are state and federal requirements that we need to meet, and it covers a major portion of TRPC's budget. For this next state fiscal year, the UPWP budget is approximately $1.8 million, and that includes $133,000 in matching funds. We also use toll credits as match for a portion of the funding, and that's $750,000 is STBG funding through the call for projects process. And that is taken off the top so that we can fund the work that we do generally across our Unified Planning Work Program. So the UPWP or our Transportation Planning Work Program is divided into 4 major sections. Our work program, which describes in detail the transportation work we do and how that $1.8 million budget is utilized. Our surface transportation program studies. So these are the projects we work on that are funded through STBG competitive grants. These can be projects TRPC sought funding for example, the first high capacity transportation project, or it can be contract work that TRPC performs for another agency. An example of that is the Thurston Rural Mobility Strategy. We also have other planning activities that describes other transportation work that is performed by TRPC or other agencies in the region that has some other sort of funding. So an example of that is High Capacity Transportation 2, which was a direct distribution from the legislature. Martin Way Crossing Strategy, which is another direct distribution from the state legislature through the Connecting Communities pilot program. So we will anticipate starting that project in this next state fiscal year. Intercity transit planning activities that they perform, and then also WashDOT planning activities that they perform. And then finally, we also have unfunded needs. And this describes the transportation work that we've identified as an agency a need to perform, but for which at this point in time, there is no secured funding. And an example of that is the regional freight strategy that we've been trying to get funded for a number of years. And you'll see a common theme with most of the unfunded needs is that they've been on our list for a while. And every time something comes up that might be able to fund it, we try to put in to get the job done. So our work program is split into 6 parts. Program management, so that's the core function that provides program fund management and the administrative and technological support required to manage and coordinate the overall MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and RTPO, Regional Transportation Planning Organization, Those are our state and federal designations, but our MPO and RTPO transportation planning program. We also have our project programming and tracking. So this is a required function of our role as an MPO, is to program and track federal funds. And our work on the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, our call for projects, and tracking our obligation authority and ensuring that we're meeting our targets all live here. The third part of the work program is our ongoing planning and outreach. So TRPC must comply with state and federal transportation planning requirements. These requirements include activities to be funded with specific state and federal planning revenues that help ensure a continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive planning process. So we coordinate with tribal, local, state, and federal agencies on transportation issues. An example of that is the work that is being done by Washoe on I-5. We also share information with the public about what our partners are doing or what's coming from the state. We share information with community organizations and other agencies as well, again, on transportation work in the region, and participating in and supporting important work in the region that impacts or touches transportation issues. Data collection, analysis, and forecasting. This is planning and required functions that are supported by robust data collection, analysis, forecasting activities. So think of all the information that we get for the employment forecast or housing and employment forecast. That's a place that information lives. Think of the information that feeds into our transportation model to help inform and help us understand how our transportation system is functioning. That's where that lives. Major initiatives are those big regional projects TRPC is working on, and we'll go into that in a little more depth later on. And then contingency and carryover. So this includes a reserve of funds to cover emerging issues and data needs that come up over the course of the fiscal year, state fiscal year. It also provides additional funding for identified items in the UPWP and a reserve of funds intended for the next state fiscal year. So basically what this means is that funding is provided according to the state fiscal year, which starts October 1. So you've got this June 30th to, July 1 to October or September 30th window that reserve is intended to cover between the federal funding cycles. So some of our key ongoing planning elements is climate mitigation plan implementation and just looking at continued support for implementing the climate mitigation plan and the things that TRPC can do to support that work. Another one is our general planning activities. So multimodal and demand management, safety and security issues, land use and transportation integrated planning, looking at integrating equity into the work that we do, the planning projects that happen on I-5 and that we're deeply involved in currently, regional plans that we need to pull together, and looking at emerging technologies. Another ongoing planning element is our urban areas and functional classification review. This is something that is tied to the census. So we do a 10-year review of urbanized area boundaries and look at what the road system or the classification of those roads needs to be adjusted based on the updates that we get from the census. So that hasn't happened. It was intended to happen, I think, this last year, but it hasn't started. So we're carrying this forward, I guess, into next year. So with our major initiatives, we've got about 6 of them that we are working on. One is to continue electric and alternative fuel vehicles planning work. So we've got a team at TRPC that is pulling together resources to help provide information to our community and our regional partners. We are looking at continuing the update of the population and employment forecast. This is something that everyone in our region uses, and we also use as part of updates to our transportation model and updates to our regional transportation plan. So speaking of which, we are going to be continuing updating the regional travel demand model. Again, this is what helps us understand how our transportation system is functioning now and how it will function in the future. We are going to be completing the update of the regional trails plan. You've heard a little bit of this over the last few months, perhaps, but we are looking to bring this home in the next state fiscal year. So by the end of actually this year, we hope to have that before you for consideration of adoption. And then we're going to be looking at beginning the update on the regional transportation plan. So last month we just finished, you finished adopting some amendments to that plan. Well, this is going to be the big update, the periodic update that we do every 5 years. And then finally, TMA transition. So we know that TRPC is going to be designated a transportation management area. That designation has not quite happened yet, but we expect it sometime soon. And because of that, we are going to need to be on point to ensure that we understand what those requirements are coming down the pipeline as part of that transition, so that we can be prepared for it and meet the new state and federal requirements that go along with that. So speaking of which, what that looks like is that we need to be having coordinated planning with state and transit agencies. This is something that we're already doing, so check that box. We will need to put together a congestion management process, and that's really trying to hone in on how we are controlling and planning for congestion in our region. We will have a change to how our MPO status is certified. Typically right now is we just self-certify, but when you become a TMA, that certification process is no longer self-certification. There's a lot more checks and reviews over that process. And so we'll need to ensure that we are ready for that. And then there's going to be changes to funding and funding distribution. So we know that there will be direct allocations to program out for both TRPC and intercity transit. So unfunded needs. In the draft of the UPWP, we've identified 7 different unfunded needs. A lot of these have been around for quite a while. Some of them have evolved over time, some of them are new, but this is what we're looking at. High capacity transportation. So in phase 1, we developed a roadmap for a high capacity transportation with a consultant. Phase 2, it consists of a study examining options for multimodal high capacity transportation to serve travelers on the I-5 corridor between Olympia and Pierce County. And as one of the fastest growing regions in the state, it's really important to be planning for these things. The study includes an assessment of travel sheds, of ridership potential, and will provide a high-level evaluation of options to enhance connectivity and accessibility for a greater South Sound region. Study also emphasizes collaboration with a diverse community of interest, including but not limited to transit agencies, businesses, WashDOT, tribes, and providers and users of transportation who, because of age, income, or ability, may face barriers and challenges. This unfunded need is really about phase 3. So once we get through phase 2 and have that assessment of travel sheds and ridership and outreach, where do we go from there? And that's what the unfunded portion is. Next up, we have a regional freight strategy. Now, don't be scared by this big number. That is actually the number that we put in for a raised grant earlier this year. So this is absolutely scalable depending on the funding sources. So a regional freight strategy is a longstanding need for our community and will help address the unique characteristics, needs, and impacts of freight mobility within our region. We face a number of challenges, including infrastructure bottlenecks, adoption of new technologies and best practices, freight data collection, supply chain issues, freight safety, freight security, system resiliency, all of these things come into play, and along with many others. This strategy is intended to convene a freight mobility committee, conduct outreach to businesses and underserved disadvantaged communities, and develop an existing and future conditions report, an implementation plan, and a final report. And as I mentioned earlier this year, TRPC submitted for a RAISE grant to fund this work, and we should know if we've received any funding for this in the next little while for it. Third up is our regional multimodal level of service. So regional policymakers have expressed the desire to move towards a multimodal level of service that will set performance goals for not only for vehicles on the road, but transit, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities in addition to those vehicles. The study will build on the regional trails plan, bicycle and micro mobility strategy that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is also an unfunded need, and TRPC's current sidewalk inventory to develop a comprehensive way of measuring multimodal level of service. It will provide essential information to prioritize and select transportation infrastructure projects in the future. And to support this effort, its estimated cost includes access to big data. Transportation resiliency strategy. So this, we know that the Thurston region is vulnerable to major earthquakes, landslides, and effects of climate change and other hazards. A regional transportation resiliency plan would assist local, tribal, and state governments with identifying system vulnerabilities and developing strategies for mitigating and managing both pre and post-incident transportation recovery priorities. So countywide bicycle and micromobility strategy. So this is really talking about the emergence of affordable electric bikes, e-bikes, micromobility devices such as electric scooters, skateboards, and similar small electric engine vehicles that allow people to travel greater distances relatively quickly and efficiently. E-bikes are becoming increasingly popular and will add to the number of people who need safe and connected routes. So as part of this strategy, we would evaluate both design considerations, operational compatibility of micromobility devices, e-bikes, and traditional bikes. We would also evaluate opportunities to fill gaps in our transportation network with paved trails, bike lanes, bike boulevards, and protected bike lanes and similar types of transportation facilities. So to comply with the passage of state legislation that allows e-bikes use on trails under certain conditions, the region and jurisdictions will also need to update local ordinances and explore speed considerations. Neighborhood center study. So this has been a priority goal of the Sustainable Thurston project to create vibrant centers, corridors, neighborhoods while accommodating growth. The corresponding target was 72% of all new and existing households in our cities, towns, and unincorporated growth areas to be within a half-mile or a 20-minute walk of an urban center, corridor, or neighborhood center, with access to goods and services to meet some of people's daily needs by 2035. Policymakers have identified the need for a neighborhood center study to research and develop strategies to increase access to goods and services in existing and planned neighborhood centers. So improvements to our call for, improvements to our federal call for project strategy and process highlighted a need to align jurisdictional definitions and requirements for designating and maintaining neighborhood centers. And so it's come up in places that maybe we didn't expect, but the need is definitely there. So in investments, policymakers seek to support not just urban corridors and centers, but also neighborhood centers, and we need greater consistency with that. The last unfunded need is actually relatively new. It's something that we are adding to the UPWP this year, and that is the regional transportation safety action plan. So between 2016 and now, the number of fatalities and serious injuries on public roads in Thurston County has been on an upward trajectory, taking us farther away from meeting target zero, which is that there are no serious injuries and fatalities on our transportation system. In 2021, 1 in 5 fatalities and serious injuries on the region's roads were non-motorists. This project is intended to develop a comprehensive safety action plan for the Thurston region. It will establish a safety task force and conduct a safety analysis to understand who is affected and where, why, and under what conditions fatal and serious injury crashes occur countywide. The project will also identify specific policy and process changes that can be made, as well as develop a list of priority projects and strategies to improve and prioritize the safety of motorists and non-motorists alike. This is work that some of our jurisdictions have already entered into or are actively completing. And so we would also look at the work that has been done so far. And then finally, as part of this effort, we would also be looking at assisting smaller jurisdictions with the development of ADA transition plans, which aids in that safety, but it also ensures that those agencies or those jurisdictions are eligible for federal funding when they need it. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have had through that.
Thank you, Katrina. Here they all come. Okay, hang on here. Let me get my pen out for the queue. Let's start with Clark. And I see Chris also has his hand up, and I will keep an eye on other folks. Go ahead, Clark.
Katrina, I'm excited about the list of unfunded projects. So to help my understanding, is this similar to the TIPS where we have to have them listed in our plan to be able to apply for federal funding if some comes available, or what's the path towards funding them, and what's the reason for including them?
So some of it absolutely is to say, hey, this is in our plan, we need to get funded for that. But I would also say that it is just in general, here's the big picture of things that we need to get funded somehow. We don't have that identified yet, but it's there. And because there is a lot of transportation dollars floating around out there, the more that we have down in writing on paper saying we have this need, it makes it easier to justify being given that funding. Anything to add to that, Mark?
No, what I was going to say was the last part you said. And so a number of these things, they don't necessarily need to be in our Regional Transportation Improvement Program, RTIP. But because of the Inflation Reduction Act funds that are out there, the bipartisan infrastructure law, we really wanted to make this unfunded needs section as fulsome as possible, knowing that there is just a lot of opportunity out there, and we're putting some staff resource on identifying and going after grants to get these unfunded needs, because we've got a good window over the next 5 years of federal funding to line these things up so that we can start ticking them off. And that's the plan.
Great. I just want to thank you for the work to include those items. They're really important to us.
Yeah, agreed. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things when you mentioned Thurston County's economy, since I've been on this board a long time, at least watching when Paul Pickett was on the board and also attending since then, I remember the last recession. So that was when I came into office. So I'm pointing this out simply because it was a reality that many of us have forgotten already. And that is that government lags in any recession. It's recovery. In other words, the private sector comes back faster, overall economy, and usually government gets funded after the fact when the economy recovers, significantly. And that last recession didn't recover very fast, as I recall, in the 2009 framework. So I'm just pointing that out. When you look at the economy, that we have positives in that government work's pretty reliable, but we have negatives that in a recession, we're the last ones to come back to full tilt as the private sector reacts a lot more quickly. So point that out. On transportation stuff, I always ask about the Highway 8 interchange with 101, because it just never seems to get funded. And that has a high accident rate, affects mostly people going up to the peninsula or elsewhere, or coming down 101 from the peninsula. And a lot of accidents there. That interchange needs to be fixed. And I don't know who's standing up for it. It's Ty Mentzer's district, but it's my district too. And I'm just concerned about the environment, as usual, concerned about sustainability. I'll give some more feedback to folks about what's going on with water conservation as we do our report out. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions or observations that anyone wants to share? We're not taking action today, so will we take action at our next meeting, Katrina? Yeah, okay, great. So it's also an opportunity to follow up, and then will TPB see this?
TPB has already seen this.
They've already seen it.
This is not something that they make a recommendation on, but we do present for information purposes.
Okay. So yeah, so we'll see you again next month. And in the meantime, if you have questions or follow up or things occur to you later, I encourage you to reach out to Katrina and staff. Thank you, Katrina. That brings us to the legislative update. Karen, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
right.
Someone is
Take it
sharing my
away.
screen. So could we put the presentation up? Thanks, Dorinda. So we have fancy colors because this was a really exciting legislative session. Did we get everything we wanted? Never. But I think we did really well with the regional priorities. And so bright colors and celebration. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to remind you about what happened during this session. It was 105 days, began January 9th, adjourned sine die April 23rd on time. The House introduced 1,090 bills, the Senate 1,066. They were all good little bills. The bills that passed the legislature, 485. As of yesterday, the governor had signed 202 bills and had vetoed 1 and partially vetoed 3. All of those were technical vetoes. We will be going into special session on May 16th. The focus of that is to deal with consistency around drug issues. But it's important to remember that the governor can call them into session. He can call them, ask them to focus on one issue, but they really basically can stay in session up to 30 days and they can do whatever they want. So they don't need to just focus on this particular piece of legislation. The 2024 session, which will be coming up in January, is 60 days. And remember that all of the bills from this year will still be active next year. So they'll get a really quick start on things. Next slide. I just wanted to say thanks to our delegation. Member Clark Gilman and DePinto from the Transportation Policy Board, Andy Ryder and Renee Radcliffe Sinclair. And as we mentioned earlier, new TRPC staff Veronica Jarvis participated in our visits and testified on a number of issues as well. Also like to thank our state representatives and senators in the 2nd, 20th, 22nd, and 35th legislative districts. I'm going to do a shout out also to Representative Barkas, who really carried the weight for us in transportation. on I-5 in particular. And then I really want to thank you, the Council and Policy Board, for narrowing the list of priorities to only have 5 things instead of 20 to bring to a less than 10-minute meeting is really appreciated. Next slide. So this is where we have wild applause. The I-5 Delta timeframe was moved up. You'll remember in the governor's budget, it was shoved back a number of years. It's back where it needs to be. The 507 roundabouts are in, and the Yelm Loop. And the Yelm Loop wasn't in the governor's budget at all. So final transportation budget was good news for all of us. Whether or not the new bill and the new process on the regional airport will be better or will work is yet to be seen, but at least the legislature understood quite well that we and others were not happy with the regional airport decisions and recommendations that will be being made. The other thing we always ask for, which is not specific, but it's more of an overarching, to maintain and grow public transportation and the multimodal system, to fund special needs and rural transportation and bridges and roads. And those were great. Sometimes the legislature sweeps the Public Works Trust Fund and doesn't have available money for the local jurisdictions. They did not do that. And so really good support for the whole system. Next slide. Our next issue was rural community main streets. We did not get funding for that. We basically were looking at the projects that we've all worked on in Rainier, in Tenino, in Rochester, in a variety of areas down there. And basically, we've all worked together to come to a certain place in studies and planning, but we need to take them just a little bit further to be ready for federal funding. And so that didn't happen. There was a lot of support for that, but the thing that did happen, which could be helpful for that, is currently metropolitan planning organizations and rural transportation planning organizations such as us are not eligible for the regional mobility grant programs. And these are big programs that fund some transformational work around the state. And so we have a budget proviso that was included that basically said that for the next this biennium 23-25, RTPOs, MPOs can apply and are eligible for those funds. So my guess is TRPC staff will be working with the rural community to look at ways to include an application there. There will probably need to be some legislative work on defining local government and state law to include MPOs when it comes to grants. A budget proviso, lasts that budget biennium, and so needs some work to include that definition going forward. For broadband, of course, there's never enough money. I think we're only realizing more and more just how uneven broadband is available to folks, especially at the speed that we need. And while originally we thought, oh, it's just the rural folks, it's the people further out that need some help with this, I think we've all found that those of us who live in neighborhoods pretty close to downtown are having trouble with broadband too. So there is $50 million in the capital budget, and they also passed a bill with a state sales and use tax exemption for those kinds of issues for federally recognized tribes. And our tribes have been really doing well in moving this infrastructure forward. So hopefully these two things will help. Again, there's not enough money, but it's a good start. Next slide. So those were our issues, and I think we all did very well on moving them forward. And I think the stories that the folks that come to the legislative meetings bring about their particular jurisdictions really are compelling to our legislators. And then I just wanted to walk through the transportation budget because there's a lot of interesting things. The governor has not yet signed the budget. I don't know when that is scheduled, but it will be soon. I haven't heard any particular rumors about substantive veto sections, but we never really know that. So there's funding in the budget to provide a statewide sidewalk inventory project with the University of Washington. And this would be something that could be helpful. We certainly are scratching our heads to say, how would we keep something like that up to date statewide when it's hard to keep our individual ones up to date? But still, let's find out what UW can do to help us. There's a study on commercial drivers. There's a number of pieces of legislation that dealt with let's make it easier for people who have had a CDL in the past. And perhaps it isn't current because there might have been some issues during COVID, or it's someone coming out of the military who drove much bigger things than a bus, who need help in getting their certification done. So really helping that because of our issues with drivers for school buses as well as intercity transit buses and others. One of the things that is very clear is that while there is funding in the budget for some projects, Department of Transportation does not have the staff resources available to do that. And so for several of the projects that I talked about, the roundabouts and the like, basically the money will come from the budget, which was assigned to DOT, and it will move right to the jurisdiction who will do the work. So the county is negotiating with DOT on some of the roundabouts. And so they'll be moving those projects forward rather than DOT. So in the budget, they had to have a procedure in place that makes it easier to share that project. You'll remember that we recently completed a household travel survey as we're getting ready to update our model. And this is a proposal to have a statewide household travel survey, which would save money. This is something we've been asking the state to look at, I think, ever since I've been at TRPC. So it's good to see that at least moving forward. Truck parking, you'll remember we have had visits from the truck folks, and there's legislation that supported more truck parking did not pass. And so this is, let's figure out a way to make this work. We certainly want drivers who are long haul truck drivers to take their breaks and take their rest time, and they need a place to park. There are a yellow alert system to inform the public of hit and run fatality and substantial bodily harm, to really get that message out. Hey, did somebody see anything? We're seeing an increasing number of hit and run accidents. So this is really putting something in place that asks the public to pay attention, implementing speed safety cameras in work zones, looking at plans for older driver safety, and improving young driver safety. So many of us in high school took driver training. That's not happening all the time now. So they believe that having that training will be helpful. Next slide with a few more things from the transportation budget. Department of Transportation, as you know, has been very aggressive in their telework and encouraging it and across the state. So this is looking at space efficiency. So where have they been able to consolidate space, lease less space? And this is something that other state agencies are working on as well. DOT would be looking at some intelligent speed monitoring in their GPS system of their vehicles. More of an emphasis on low-cost enhancements with priority to projects that improve safety. So this would be pots of funding that your jurisdictions would be able to apply to. They're moving, as we've talked about before, to the vehicle miles traveled target implementation, and we are adopting or have adopted the state targets. The funding that we received through last budget cycle for the high capacity study, we needed to move some of it into the next biennium. So they successfully did what we needed in moving that forward. Also, a lot of emphasis on overburdened communities, and this had to deal with carbon reduction strategies. Next slide. And then there's a few more transportation budget. As you know, we manage the commute trip reduction program on behalf of Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County. This has been around for about 30 years, and we got a little bit more funding, which was the first time since the CTR program was put in place. And so there's a recognition of how transportation demand management impacts safety and climate and all of those issues. New emphasis on some tribal transportation grant programs. The budget includes a van pool subsidy statewide for all state employees. So this is encouraging state employees to use van pools, to not be driving their own single cars, and this is a big deal. Recognition that local agencies could use some help on using alternative fuel vehicles, on installing infrastructure, on what's available under the state contract that they can buy on, so some technical assistance and education. Here's one that I wanted to put on the top and put on this list 27 times, and that is there's a pilot program for swapping federal funding for state funding. And that's one that Oregon has done this for a number of years. We've been pushing really hard, and you'll remember that we've talked several times to you about, especially for smaller jurisdictions, that meeting those federal guidelines just adds so much to the cost of the program. So this would be an opportunity to say, what happens if we are able to do that swap? And so, of course, we're jumping up and down and saying we want to be the pilot here in Thurston County, which we always do. We don't know that yet. DOT is supposed to develop an action plan to establish cycle highways in locations that connect population centers. We've had some great conversations with Department of Transportation and others about, now that we have e-bikes, and especially maybe for JBLM kinds of trips, couldn't we have a bike highway along I-5, and what would that mean? And so we're going to be studying those kinds of things. And then the next one, I know that those of you who in the room who are engineers will understand this, but this basically was looking at traffic conflict screening programs and helping to coordinate those. When I talked to some engineers at DOT, they were very excited about this, so I put it on the list, but I have to tell you that I'm not an engineer. And then Department of Transportation is supposed to establish an e-bike rebate program. So, wow, what a budget full of things that we would like to see. There's some things in there that we don't particularly love, but I didn't put them on the celebration list. Next slide. I also wanted to talk about just a few of the transportation bills that passed. And I have included, when we have someone from one of our districts that was a sponsor for the last several sessions, Representative Obarno has been working to add bridge jumping signs to encourage people who are thinking about jumping off a bridge to say, hey, take a minute. Here's some information on where you can contact people. As we all know, the suicide rates are challenging, especially in youth. And so this is just another measure to hopefully interrupt a process of someone who might be considering jumping. Representative Orcutt, again, was helping with some of those pieces of legislation that ease the commercial driver's licensing process. Made some decisions about what the primary focus of the FMCIB, which is the Freight Mobility and Strategic Investment Board. As we move into being a TMA, as Katrina talked about, the whole freight mobility becomes even more important in the work we do. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a little bit of change in focus on this. And so we'll be looking at that more. House Bill 1112 creates a new basic crime of a gross misdemeanor offense of negligent driving with a vulnerable user. As Katrina mentioned, we're seeing a lot of accidents that include people walking on bicycles, using mobility devices. So this is a recognition from the enforcement side. We need to look at the design side and the like, but this is about enforcement. The next one is the same kind of thing, House Bill 1319. Basically, this is when law enforcement must report a driver so that they can be re-examined. So again, that's sort of upping the ante. A controversial bill, 1457, dealt with, it's kind of like the truck parking piece. Now that we're having so many smaller deliveries through Amazon and other folks, this is looking at, can the driver use the restroom facilities at a business when they are delivering things to the business? Next slide. State troopers, just like many other organizations, they are facing real recruitment problems and issues. And so Representative Barkas was a sponsor on a bill that provides some incentives to that recruitment. The next bill, license survey fees, the last legislation was not clear that would also include all trucks, and that's some of the funding for the climate work. This one, very controversial, allowing tow trucks to use certain lights on their vehicles. And it was interesting to me because I really don't think about, well, okay, they have lights on their vehicles, that's fine. But it's kind of like how the signals are managed in the sense of turf. No, only police can have these lights so people know that there are police. And so this is a bill that has been, at least for the last few years, 4 years, we've been talking about tow trucks and light. Speed safety cameras in work areas, and again, DOT responsible for cameras, State Patrol doing the enforcement. This is a good consumer piece that Department of Licensing is going to check for open safety recalls on vehicles. So when you do your vehicle renewal, and when they find out about this, they'll provide written notice to the owner that there's a recall on your vehicle. So a good little consumer piece. And then this is an exciting piece, although it is not local to us, but it basically, this bill provides a way for the Department of Transportation and the Lummi Nation for DOT to hand over right of way. So this is one of those government to government issues that wasn't covered. So I think it opens some doors, and I'm always excited to see ways when we are removing bureaucracy to allow us to work together better. Next slide. So, and the final slide. So I want to thank you again for limiting the priorities. However, I couldn't not look at all kinds of things. So if you have questions on other topics, we were also looking at elementary school recess to improve physical activity and tax increment financing and the changes to that. The voluntary stewardship program, which we are part of, mental health, equity, all of these, there are legislation included in the link that we'll send with my slides, will be a link so that you can look at the report that comes out from committees the House Program Research Office, which basically has all the bills in it that passed. You'll need to look a little further to see if they've been signed or not, because this is done at the end of session. And just a warning, and I'll put this in the email with that information, is that it is organized by committee. And sometimes a bill that you think obviously went to transportation actually went to a different committee for a variety of reasons. So open to questions, comments.
Thank you, Karen. We have two folks in the queue, so we'll go with Chris and then Robin, and I will keep an eye on hands.
Hey, Karen, just an added for this year. We now have the 19th legislative district representing Rochester.
Yep.
So we have three more legislators in our county.
Yep.
They represent mainly Southwest Washington, Grace Harbor, Pacific County. The most senior of them is Mr. Walsh, who's in the House. He got there well, they all got there fairly recently. So just want to point that out so that people realize that we've got to build relationships with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Robin, go ahead.
Thanks for the brief, Karen. Covered a lot of ground this season. I had three maybe questions. Can we get a little bit more information about the assistance for public agencies related to installing charging stations? I'm
Yes.
curious whether state agencies are eligible for that.
Okay.
I'm excited about the van pool subsidy for state employees. That's really cool. Also would love to hear more information about that. And then how can we lean in on the bike highways thing? Is that something that TRPC is going to take the lead on in the future? Because, yeah, your note about putting a bike lane next to I-5 made me really excited. It'd be really cool if I could get from Lacey to Tumwater the same path that the freeway takes instead of going around the back streets.
Okay, well, I know that Mark is about to turn off my mic because I will say, yes, TRPC should do this. As someone who's leaving very shortly. So Mark, this is one of your favorite ideas. So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think the best opportunity for us as a region right now is the National Environmental Policy Act review that's going to be going on around I-5 between Mounts Road through Tumwater. And why? Because that is something that is active. It's geographically focused around the interstate. And WashDOT is very keen on having a parallel bike path be part of this proposal. They are including that in all of the alternatives that are being looked at for I-5 between Mounts Road and Marvin Road. Well, once we get that infrastructure in place, I mean, that's the hardest stretch, right? That crosses the Nisqually River. Once we get it from Mounts Road to Marvin Road, and we continue that I-5 work from Marvin Road down through Tumwater, I think that is our best opportunity to make sure that a parallel bike path is part of what is designed for this. And we definitely have a partner in WashDOT on that. And so I have been vocal about this in my participation in the I-5 work, and will continue to be. And the extent to which all our jurisdictions can weigh in, the next opportunity will be, they will have a draft planning and environmental linkages report that is supposed to come out in either September or October. We'll keep you up to date on that. But the extent to which any of our members want to comment on that about the importance of including a parallel bike path, these are excellent opportunities for that, because the added cost will be a drop in the bucket compared to everything else associated with this I-5 work.
That's great to
Um,
hear. Thank you.
I also wanted to note that Veronica Jarvis is doing a lot of work with JBLM on transportation options, van pools, other ways to look at how folks that are going there on a daily basis can travel. And there will likely be some interest there because, as we've mentioned with e-bikes and the like, traveling from Olympia or Lacey to JBLM to go to work becomes something available to more people. And so Veronica will keep working with them, encouraging them to do that.
Thank you. Good questions. Yeah, I was saying with that highway and the e-bike, we're gonna be looking like the Netherlands soon. All right, maybe not quite. No wooden shoes. Okay, Clark, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm going to pivot from I-5 to a high five. That's why I have my little hand up there. That having had the privilege to ride along with Karen and visit with legislators both last session and this session, our organization has had a real commitment to how we do regional projects. And one of the biggest obstacles has been, how do we fund smaller projects and rural projects when the funding sources are so much geared to urban areas and organizations with larger staffs. So I just want to acknowledge that the regional community Main Street legislation that didn't pass this time, but Karen was amazing at advocating for that and making the case. And the federal state dollar swap, again, really super important to us. And mostly I wanted to say the regional mobility grant issue of not including regional planning organizations in the definition. Karen hit that hard in every meeting we were at. Our representatives helped carry that. And so I'm just super excited that we won that. And I hope that TRPC will continue to advocate that in order to satisfy our regional objectives, we have to figure out ways to be able to fund rural and smaller entities projects. So Karen, thank you so much for that advocacy.
Yes, there were some really exciting wins on the list for this session. So thank you to everybody who participated. Are there any other questions or comments, observations? Oh, Carolyn, go ahead.
Hi. Well, I think this has to feel really good for Karen to be ending her career on such a high note with all the work she's done for us and with the legislature. So I'm just going to call for a big round of applause for Karen.
She's embarrassed.
Hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, here. Okay, are there any other questions, comments?
I just have one, and
Hi,
that's about the culvert issue. You mentioned the rural areas. We've identified in our county 5 culverts besides the one we're trying to get fixed near Green Cove, which is a salmon bearing stream. The way DOT operates is it doesn't allow utility crossings to get funded through their funds. So we're working with the county on this project, but I just want to point out, with all those delivery vans running around in all our arterials and capillaries of our road system that are very heavy, they're wearing out the infrastructure that's about to expire anyway very quickly. And I've noticed it in my neighborhood. It's all happening all throughout the county. So just a heads up that, we're going to need a lot more culvert repair, just simply because the infrastructure is aging, but also because it's getting taxed by a lot heavier commercial vehicle loads. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Good reminder. Okay, that was just an informational report. So we don't have any action to take on that. And that brings us to our report from outside committee assignments. And that is the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board. And typically that's Helen, and Joe is the backup. So I don't know if we have a report tonight or today. What time is it? This morning. Okay.
I don't believe we do, Chair.
Okay, so possibly Helen will provide a written report, and then presumably Berlina will send that to us when it's ready for us. So that means we will move to the executive director's report. So Mark, go ahead.
All right. I do have a few things to continue the good news train. So one of the things that was in Move Ahead Washington was a new program, and Move Ahead Washington was the state transportation package. One of the things that they included was a new Connecting Communities program, where the intent of that is to better connect historically underserved communities. And we put in, even though we weren't completely done yet, we put in our Martin Way corridor work for consideration for this new Connecting Communities program. We've been holding our breath as to whether or not it would be funded by the end of session. It was. And so we are receiving more than $700,000 to begin implementing pedestrian, the kind of the design work, the outreach and design work around pedestrian crossings along the Martin Way corridor that we studied, which was from the Y with Pacific clear to Deutero on the far end. So I'm super excited about this. So we're moving right from planning into the beginning of implementation, and even better, we're starting with implementation for the benefit of our underserved communities to provide better access to transit, to key services. It's going to be super exciting. So that is work that'll get underway. Then the hope is, again, going back to the federal funds, is if we can get some of this work done to figure out exactly where the pedestrian crossings are needed, what they need to look like. This work will get us to 30% design for some of these pedestrian crossings, which then sets us up perfectly to go after the actual construction funds to get some of these things done. So that will be, stay tuned. I'm really excited about that. As I mentioned, the planning manager position you just approved, it'll hit the streets on May 9th. So you'll all see that, and any help you can provide in distributing that far and wide. This is an important position for us. So we want to get the best person we possibly can. And then one last item is, folks may not remember that there are 18 metropolitan planning organizations and regional transportation planning organizations. So MPOs and RTPOs, the acronym you hear all the time from us. There are 18 of us across the state, and we meet quarterly together. And we have a chair and a vice chair to help in that coordination across MPOs and RTPOs. And I've been asked to serve as the vice chair of that group, and eventually the chair. I hope I have all of your permission to do so. I think it's a really good opportunity to help us better understand what all of us are doing across the state and how we can be more effective as our organizations of MPOs and RTPOs. One of the reasons they said they asked me to do it was they do want to increase their work with the legislature around. For the past 6 years, we've asked for an increase in the funding that we get as regional transportation planning organizations from the state, because there hasn't been any increase in those funds since the creation of regional transportation planning organizations. And so that'll be one of our focus over the next couple of years, is looking to get an increase in state funding for that. So I'm pretty excited to get to serve and better understand our partner organizations across the state. So I'll keep you posted on that too. And that's what I have, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Congratulations. That's really exciting. Exciting
Yeah,
for
thank you.
and yeah, exciting for us too. Don't share too many of our secrets. But
All right.
see what you can bring that doesn't like let the cat out of the bag with our like crack team at getting more money.
Sounds good.
But yeah, super exciting, and glad to see that folks are recognizing the excellent work that's happening in our region and looking to us as leaders. So that always feels really good, and I'm sure it feels good for you and staff as well. Okay, so that brings us to member check-in. This is a time for you to share if you've got something exciting you want to share with the rest of us, or maybe something you're excited about that you heard today that you're excited to bring back to your jurisdiction. So I will run the queue. Let me know if you want to talk. All right, Clark, go ahead.
I know I'm talk. But I have been learning more about the urban growth management subcommittee work and reading our bylaws, meeting with this Olympias planning staff, and a couple of thoughts. One is that I think it's likely to be more than one meeting, and that we haven't really convened since the regional transportation plan in 2020. The buildable lands was updated in 2021, and really the last round was right at the end of Sustainable Thurston, almost a decade ago. So I would ask that maybe in our next agenda, we might consider whether we would convene the version of the Technical Advisory Committee that looks at this, and convene the Urban Growth Management Subcommittee to look at countywide planning policies as kind of an after action after we consider this Grand Mound effort. I think we may have some learning with the updates and plans we've had since 2015, and as we run through this discussion about Grand Mound. So I wanted to put that out and have people think about it, and it might land on a future agenda.
Cool. Thanks, Clark. There was a lot of good discussion about that last time. So I appreciate you kind of bringing those reflections to us to continue that conversation. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that there's additional new information out about water conservation measures, even more than your wonderful staff have probably already collected from some University of Washington person who's working in the environmental program there, who did a presentation to the Chehalis Partnership, which is on their website for the Chehalis Partnership, which we are a member of, and so is the county. That conservation measure includes the updating of new technologies that are being used, especially for outdoor watering, but all sorts of things, timers, all sorts of things that have gotten a lot more sophisticated since I have been tracking this issue. And I just want to let folks know that rather than reinventing the wheel, you can just go to the website and find those things for your jurisdiction there that this UW student did for the city of Chehalis, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Amy, go ahead.
I just wanted to let the group know there had been some confusion around the Port of Olympia's position on the estuary and dam removal. And we clarified that by taking a commission vote at our last meeting and voting in favor of formally supporting the estuary. So we signed off on a multi-jurisdictional letter that we had previously not, and we are also doing a resolution to formalize that support. So just so everyone knows, alongside all of you, we are definitely in favor of that project.
Cool. Thanks for the update, Amy. Cheryl, go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm having technical difficulties. Can you hear me? Yes, good. So the West Olympia Timberland Library doubled in size, and tomorrow from 11 to 1 is the grand opening, and it's at Capitol Mall. It is 9 out of 29 in terms of our libraries, in terms of physical circulation. And we see people from throughout our region going to that library. So you're all invited to that tomorrow. Second, we are deeply involved in the 5 counties we serve, the broadband action teams in each of the counties, including Thurston County. And we've put together our digital asset or digital equity plan for their submission that is due to the Department of Commerce June 14th. A copy of our digital equity plan is available at trl.org under media. And lastly, we are putting together a virtual event that is free. It will be recorded by TCTV. It is called Moving Forward Together, Mental Health and Resilience in the Region, and learn about mental and social emotional health and opportunities for STEM education and family wage careers. This is a webinar. People need to register. Up to 1,000 people can attend. It's Thursday, May 25th from 9 to noon. You can learn more at trl.org. And thank you for listening to my voice this morning.
Thank you, Cheryl. I hope you feel better and get to heal and rest, but thank you for being here, and that's cool, exciting work. We're going to go with Carolyn and then Robin.
Okay, well, 2 things from Lot. One, I think you planners will appreciate is we have just completed our strategic plan that addresses Lot's needs through the year 2050. And it was a huge undertaking for those of you who are city and county reps. It's sort of equivalent to redoing your whole comprehensive plan. And the staff there has just done an incredible job of putting that together, anticipating needs, planning for them, and including where the money's going to come from. And along those lines, another celebratory piece is that we're going to be on June 14th, we're going to be celebrating the completion of the Biological Process Improvements Project. And that's, I know people aren't too into sewage treatment, but it's important because this process really uses natural methods to treat sewage. And I think it's a real feather in our cap. I didn't know this until I got on the board, but Lot is considered, like the leader in the Puget Sound region in sewage treatment. And I hope I'm not going to upstage Robin on this one, but I just wanted to invite everybody. Lacey is having his annual Spring Fun Fair, May 20th and 21st. So it's one of the early festivals, and if you got family, friends you want to entertain, it's a good place to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. Robin, and then we'll go to Debbie.
Yeah, come to the fun fair. I will be at a booth at the fun fair from 10 to noon on the 20th, the Saturday. So come see me. I'm going to say this just because I'm trying to say it in every meeting I'm in. It's the 36th annual Bicycle Community Challenge. It's all of May, so please ride your bike, get out there and enjoy the sunshine. And a little bit, Cheryl's comment made me think of something. There was a recent study that came out from the Surgeon General about the really harmful impacts of loneliness just on Americans. We don't spend as much time with the people that are close to us as we used to, dramatically less time, and it has very tangible negative health effects. So think about riding your bike and go meet some people, go meet some friends, ride your bike with your friends, spend time with the people that are close to you intentionally because it's good for you.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Hear, hear. Debbie, go ahead.
Great. Robin mentioned the bicycle challenge for this month. Perfect. This is the exciting part of when half of this board sits on Intercity Transit Board. So it's always hard to also give reports. I also wanted to let everyone know we're deep into our process of getting the new CEO for Intercity Transit. So more information will be coming out on that soon. And then with that, I'm going to flip over and put on my Tumwater hat. In a few minutes, there'll be a press release announcing who our new city administrator is. And I'm so excited. And this is for anybody who's done this kind of process. Oh my goodness, I'm sure all the individuals in cities can appreciate this. This is not an easy process and it takes forever. So the press release will be coming out, and Amy Evans, do you know yet?
No, I do not.
Okay. So the press release will come out shortly.
I think that may have been a hint.
Yeah, it is. It's Lisa Parks.
Always the last to know. Always the last to know.
I know, I'm sorry. It's Lisa Parks. It's going to be out there shortly anyhow. And Lisa Parks comes from the port. So that's why I was wanting to double check. And
You're lucky to have her. She is extremely skilled and knowledgeable person. So
Yes,
you're lucky to
yes.
have her.
So it's really great. And then just a follow up to, which is related to transportation. We're still deep in the process of the 3 roundabouts on Trosper and Capitol, and the exit ramps. So this is going to be probably another year process. This was replacing very old infrastructure. Of course, whenever you start one project, 3 other things break and you have to replace that and fix that. So it's quite a comprehensive and a very large project. So just ask everybody for their patience if you're in the area, and we want to really support those businesses. However, if you don't need to be in that area, use Tumwater Boulevard exit. It'll save you some time. So just saying. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie, and congratulations, Debbie, and my condolences, Amy. Always good to keep good people in the area though. So Carolyn, is that an old hand? I'm sorry, or a new hand? I just noticed it. I apologize.
Sorry, it's an old hand. I
Okay,
forgot.
I hadn't noticed it was up, and then I thought, oh, did it go back up or was it still up? Are there anything else for sharing? Okay, I will share just a couple of things. Speaking of construction and things like that, we are in Olympia are in the midst of completing the last major construction project on our bond. So some of you may be aware that one of the oldest community or school buildings in the area is now Avanti High School. It was built right around the same time Lincoln Elementary School was built by the same sort of designer, and they are both celebrating 100 years. So that's exciting. And I had a chance to tour the construction site, and it's really a beautiful space, but it has also led to many surprises. Inside a 100-year-old building, you find all kinds of things you weren't expecting, but it's a beautiful space to be able to welcome children to and the community to. So when it's open, I hope you will all come and take a peek. I'm going to deviate here. And because Scott didn't mention it, I will just give Evergreen a shout out. Recently being named the Thurston County Chamber's Green Business Award for 2023. Congratulations to Evergreen for all of their sustainability and green work. That's what happens when you're an alum. Then I get your announcement, Scott, and then I'm gonna embarrass you. Scott is featured in the story about it for his work. So congratulations, Scott.
Well, thank you, Hillary. Thank you.
I mean, as an alum, I'm really proud of that too. So, and it definitely influences the decisions that I make as a school board member. So well done, guys. And then I wanted to take like maybe 1.5 minutes to mention something about the legislative session. So it was a great legislative session for transportation and for housing. And I want to celebrate those achievements and accomplishments. And I want to just sort of like help folks understand how schools are experiencing this legislative session, and maybe give you some insight into some of the things you might be hearing from the community about their frustration about education right now. So we had some great and significant transportation wins for our region in the legislature. It may interest you to know that most of the school districts in the state are chronically underfunded for transportation. And I can't speak for Mel or for Graham, but I can tell you that in Olympia, we spend just shy of $1 million more than the state gives us to move our students from their homes to their schools. And that's money that you actually pay from your local levy. So we call those enrichment levies, but they actually aren't enrichment because the state chronically underfunds some of the essential features of education in this state. Your local tax dollars go to pay for things that the state has said are part of their obligation. And we had hoped they would fix that problem. Legislatures came to Olympia this year saying that that was a top priority for them. And they decided they did not want to spend that money on moving students from their homes to their schools. So that we're grieving that right now because we are having to make really difficult decisions across our state about how we're going to prioritize those essential functions over the things that our community says are important to them, but are not funded at all or mandated. And another thing I want to just mention that I don't think people are really aware of is that in this state, local levies subsidize about $900 million of special education services. And just between North Thurston, Tumwater, and Olympia, it's over $20 million a year that the local property taxes go to pay for basic special education services, such as resource room teachers, paraeducators to support students who have a disability, status and who have a right to an appropriate education. And so that has forced for many of us across the state some very difficult decisions. And I just wanted to sort of, I don't want to be the downer because there's so many great things that are happening, but I think it's really important for people to understand that. And I think people are very surprised to find out that neither the federal government nor the state government actually pay fully for special education, and they never have.
Yeah.
So it's not like they did at one point and it just failed to keep up with inflation. They have never paid for it. We have an obligation. It's an honor and a privilege as schools to provide those services and to live into the promise of a free and appropriate public education for all. But I feel like I need to make sure that you all understand that that's not something that the state is actually paying for or has ever paid for in its entirety, nor the federal government. So when you look at your property tax bill, just know that that money that you're sending to schools, most of it is actually going to pay for things that the state has said they should be paying for and that they're not actually paying for. So just a little nugget there. It means that the green initiatives that we may want to live into in our district, we scraped back money towards renewable and redundant energy in our district to repurpose it so that we could cover basic services. And that was a wrench for us because we really care about leading as a green school district, but ultimately we have to make sure that students have the services that they're entitled to. So when you get the chance, I would encourage you to share that information with people who you speak with, and also to sort of reach out if you're curious and learn more about what schools look like now. I'm happy to host you at any of our buildings, as I'm sure our other members. So, oh, Chris, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, very short here. Just wanted to say, since I'm a member of the Water Resources Advisory Committee, which I don't think anybody else sits on with ecology, that they're about to revise their policy 2030, which affects municipal water rights. That affects us because we do mostly rural water systems in the county and the adjacent counties, not urban ones, but probably less a concern for an urban area, but it does affect how well you can transfer water rights, especially inchoate ones that are not in use, that are promised, but you haven't developed out to them. So as you know, that agency ecology oversees water rights and oversees whether you can transfer or utilize potential water rights. And so by changing that policy, they may change the whole ball game about how much water is available to us. And I've always made the legislature aware that there are no rural water rights to expand school systems. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And if there are no further comments, then I think we are done. And I would remind us that our next meeting is in person on June 2nd. So I look forward to seeing you all in person. Let's come and spend some time connecting with each other and doing good work together on behalf of our community. Thanks and have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you.